Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are in the country today, and welcome to February's policy briefing series, Learn, Engage, Represent, Grassroots Policy and NASPA's National Student Affairs Day of Action. So you may know me from other policy briefings. My name is Diana Ali. I'm the Assistant Director for Policy Research and Advocacy here at NASPA, and I am so excited to be joined by my colleague here today, and I'll turn it over to Monica to let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Nixon, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Assistant Vice President for Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice at NASPA, and really excited to talk with you about how NASPActs and the National Student Affairs Day of Action are aligning this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Monica. Okay, so we are going to kind of jump right into things. We're going to just talk about NSADA, or the National Student Affairs Day of Action, a bit about NASPActs. We'll talk about the topical focus areas that we're going to be centering on for March, and then we're going to move into some tools as to how to get involved. So, NSADA works to create opportunities for student affairs professionals to engage collectively in civic engagement and advocacy opportunities for one day a year. And last year, NSADA coincided with NASPA's Hill Days in July. And this year, we wanted to catch the height of when states are in session, which usually tends to be from January through April. So the National Student Affairs Day of Action is coinciding this year with the annual conference. It will be taking place on March 12th. Mark your calendars for Tuesday, March 12th, in collaboration, like Monica mentioned, with NASPActs. As student affairs professionals, you can engage in many different forms of advocacy, from institutional-based advocacy, advocacy as faculty and staff, and advocacy on behalf of students. Public statements of support, sign-ons to community and association letters, reaching out to government affairs staff, are all kind of ways that you can advocate through an institutional lens. Faculty and staff-based advocacy can focus on becoming that squeaky wheel and strategically pushing campus conversations with stakeholders forward and creating spaces for marginalized populations to feel safe and speak without having to disclose status, as well as connecting to community-based organizations such as food banks and public transportation centers and childcare centers and that kind of a thing. Examples, just to let you all know, of advocacy on behalf of students include inviting associations and organizations to come to campus and promoting active civic engagement and democratic learning on campus through voting initiatives such as those that we have at NASPA, through NASPA's LEAD initiatives and the Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement Knowledge Community and Annual Conference. Another great resource I wanted to mention quickly on this slide is that of the Association of Public Land Grant and Universities, or APLUs. Students have an impact guide, and it's just a quick one-pager and has these 7 tips for student-led advocacy, and it's really great. Young Invincibles also holds trainings on advocacy for students on campuses throughout the nation, so I would check both of those out. And before I turn it over to Monica, I just wanted to mention a few definitions here just to get us going with the learning process. NASPA is a 501c3, so we tend to stay in the policy analysis lane, but we do have some opportunities to participate in lobbying, such as the NASPA Hill Day last year and the National Student Affairs Day of Action. But just to go through some specifics, lobbying is taking a specific stand on a specific piece of legislation. Advocacy is taking a specific stand on a specific issue without mentioning that specific policy or legislation. And grassroots advocacy is actually just lobbying, except it's done from the ground up through people power instead of through paid lobbyists. Policy analysis, again, which is what NASPA tends to focus on, is providing explanation, context, and education around specific legislation without advocating a stance or position. So if you are interested in learning more about lobbying versus advocacy and the boundaries of your participation as a staff member, NASPA has some additional information up on the Research and Policy Institute blog through our Engage series if you're interested in that. So I'm going to turn it over to Monica now to talk a little bit about NASPActs.
Thank you, Diana, and thanks for walking us through those definitions. I think that's really helpful to think about what are our roles, right? We're working with students, but we are also people in our communities, and so what can we do as student affairs staff, and how can we work with our institutions? So NASPActs, I hope that this logo looks familiar to you, that you've seen it at some of our recent conferences. NASPActs is a key initiative of the Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice Division, which is a division that has a seat on the board of directors. We're going into our 4th year of the program, which provides ongoing opportunities for social action and civic engagement. Much of that has been centered on things that happen at our conference, but as an EISJ division, we're also looking for opportunities to extend opportunities for action that happen throughout the year. And that's why this partnership with National Student Affairs Day of Action and kind of our ongoing partnership with the research and policy area of NASPA is really important for us. NASPActs began as a volunteer-led initiative. It grew out of members taking a stance against discriminatory legislation in Indiana, which is where the 2016 conference took place. We also have had subsequent calls to action on the deferred action for on the DACA program, on rollbacks to that, administration policies that affect minoritized students. So there have been rallies and letter writing campaigns that have happened as a part of NASPActs at the 2017 and 2018 conferences. We are looking to, as I said, evolve the model to provide opportunities for ongoing educational and advocacy options. And so that really focus on equity, inclusion, and social justice and ways that our members want to be engaged. And I'll share a little bit more later about the specific things that we'll be doing at the conference itself.
Awesome. Thanks, Monica. So let's start diving into the topic areas that we are focusing on this year. These issue areas fall under 5 tenets of NASPA's public policy agenda, which you can view on the Public Policy Division website. The agenda tenets include student success and college completion, student safety and wellness, including financial and mental wellness and protections for trans students and victims of sexual assault, costs of higher education, student debt and borrower protections, inclusive access and success in higher education, and civic engagement and freedom of expression. So you can kind of tell from those tenets that I just listed that, these topical issue areas are not exhaustive of everything that we track here at NASPA, but these are some of the big bucket issues that our members care about and that take a prominent role in the higher education policy arena. So if you're interested in getting involved on the local or national level with any of these issue areas as part of NSADA and the NASPA Policy and Advocacy Team will be updating NASPA's official background briefs and position statements on these topics, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few slides. But I did want to do a very, very high-level overview. I know that we're a little bit limited on time today on what we're watching, what policy conversations we're watching in terms of these topic areas. So on free speech, we're watching state-level legislation limiting campus control, and we're also watching requirements for policy development publications and oversight reports. And we're also watching campus safety issues and kind of costs around associated with campus safety issues. On sexual assault prevention and response, we're watching the new Title IX proposed regulations, and we're also watching for the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act, which expired in December. And then we're looking at state-level policies and those state-level policies that may be in conflict with the newly proposed regulations. On trans and gender, non-binary inclusion, we're looking at the religious exemption clause in Title IX, and we're also looking at trans-inclusive and exclusive state-based legislation. On immigration and international students, we're looking at a possible congressional compromise around DACA. We're also watching the Supreme Court to see if it will take up the deferred action, any issue around the deferred action for childhood arrivals continuation, or DACA. And we're also watching regulatory visa restriction policies that are coming down the pipeline. On accessibility, we're really focusing on institutional accountability and compliance with state and federal laws, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and on higher education, on the Higher Education Act reauthorization. What we're watching right now and what we're seeing happen is bipartisan congressional support for student aid programs. We're expecting the House to introduce an HEA bill in March, and the Senate Help Committee to introduce a bill by December, possibly. So NSADA specifically uses a three-part model of learn, engage, and represent. And you might remember this from last year. So this is the reason why the briefing is titled What It Is Today. And if you're interested in learning more, do check out our most recent blog post on the RPI website, written by the Director of Policy Research and Advocacy, Terry Lynn Hines, to give us a little bit more insight than what we're covering today on this model of learn, engage, and represent. So the first step is kind of what we're doing now, just learning and laying out the blueprint of how to get involved. NASPA's Policy and Advocacy Team provides blog posts several times a week, and you can find those on the Research and Policy Institute website. And these are on state and federal-based issues affecting higher education. NASPA is, just one of many higher education membership and advocacy groups. So we do encourage you to look to other associations as well, to really get as comprehensive information as possible on federal and state level legislation regarding ensuring the success for all college students. Part of the learning process is to start thinking about feasibility for involvement on your campus or through personal advocacy. And this is also where learning more about what form of advocacy makes the most sense for you given your role on campus is also a good idea. So the second part of our model is that of engagement and to become an active participant in our representative democracy. So there are tons of ways to engage in our democracy, from voting regularly in local, state, and national elections, to reaching out to your campus government affairs team, to learning about what issues are actually being tracked for your campus, to contacting your elected officials directly. The third tenet here, or the third part of our model, is represent. There are so many different ways to represent. You might choose to share information about legislation that you care about on social media, or call or text or local elected officials to discuss a higher ed issue at hand. You might join a protest or a rally, or even organize a lobbying day of your own. And we can talk a little bit more about this in a few slides. But one additional way to represent is by attending NASPA's policy pop-ups if you happen to be coming to annual this year. So I want to turn it over to Monica to talk a little bit about this model in terms of how it fits in with NASPActs and the policy pop-ups at annual.
Thank you, Diana. So the model that the EISJ division is going with this year for NASPActs programming, we're doing this in the form of what we're calling policy pop-ups. So one piece of the NASPActs action that's happened at the last couple of conferences is that it's intended to in some way interrupt the normal course of business of either the location where the conference takes place or of what members are doing in the course of their conference going, right? Like what you do as a, while you're attending the conference, what we want to do is to kind of put these opportunities for action in front of our members in a way that causes them to pause. And so what we're doing with NASPActs this year is providing an opportunity for members to really learn about 5 issues, and then to offer up opportunities for things that they can do, right? Either at the conference or things that they can do when they return to their campuses. ways that they can represent their students and themselves in these conversations about policy. And so Diana, I'd love to share the details about the policy pop-ups. So the 5 issues, and you'll see some strong alignment with the topical areas for NSADA. So the 5 policy pop-ups, they'll take place on the Monday and Tuesday of the conference, and they're in various locations. So again, we want to put these in front of members wherever they are at the conference. But we'll have one on Title IX. We'll have one about campus accessibility. We'll have one that's focused on immigration and international students. Another that's focused on inclusion for transgender and gender non-binary people, and then finally one on civic engagement and freedom of expression. And where we've located these and where they're taking place in the conference, we're trying to take advantage of some other things that are happening around this. So for example, the Title IX policy pop-up takes place after Amanda Wynn's featured keynote about sexual violence and prevention. We'll have the inclusion for transgender and gender non-binary people will be taking place near an exhibit that focuses on the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall uprising. So again, really trying to take advantage of ways that people might already be engaging to ask them to go a little bit deeper. So that's what we're going to be doing with the policy pop-ups. And these will be presented by staff and volunteers from the Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice Division.
Awesome. So you might remember these NSADA materials from last year, but we are updating them for March. So we will be offering position statements, background briefs, and sample letters at the state and federal level as tools to assist you in your participation for NSADA. These materials will be updated to the event website and will be available in early March. So the current version of the website is from July, and so we're going to be introducing a new event website, which is not available yet, so I'm not able to share it with you all now, but I will include the original National Student Affairs Day of Action event page in the slide deck, so you can get that after the briefing if you want to look at the position statements, background briefs, and sample letters from last year. And as I mentioned, well, actually, I don't think I mentioned this before, but NASPA will also be holding a letter writing campaign on site at Annual. So along with these kinds of tools that will be available for you in early March, you can participate from anywhere using the sample letter templates. You can also participate on site by filling out a letter of your own. NASPA also has on the original event webpage for NSADA, NASPA also has guidelines for starting a letter writing campaign of your own. So if you're interested in that, there is a little bit less than a month away from, NSADA on March 12th. So you do have time to organize, some kind of action or event on campus if you're interested in learning more about how to do that. I recommend that you check that out. And the reason why we don't have, the sample letters available for you right now, and these will include, specific details about legislation on all of these different topic areas in the states where legislation has been introduced, is because, this conversation is so rapidly evolving and changing. And so we want to provide sample letters that have the most recent information about legislation and in your state for you. So what can you do right now? I kind of just talked about how we're going to be putting out these tools, but they're not available yet. In the coming weeks, we encourage you to reach out to learn how you can work with your institution to participate in some form of advocacy on March 12th. Or, just start reading up on the issues that you care about and see if there's been any new legislation introduced in your state. It's not too late to plan a letter writing campaign, to bring in outside advocacy groups for topical trainings, to organize panels or forums with local legislators or policymakers, and it would be really cool to even plan a trip to your state capital if that's feasible. But I think right now is the time to start thinking about, what action steps are actually feasible in anticipation of the day of action. And, just to exemplify, another great way of taking action is submitting for public comment. You might have joined us for one of our information sessions on the Title IX proposed rules, where we talked about the importance of submitting substantial public comments. There are, a number of regulations that have been either proposed or in the pipeline to be proposed that are upcoming that will have comment periods open for you to contribute to if that is an additional area in which you're interested in taking part of action. And NASPA has a Q&A on submitting public comments that is also available on the NSADA website. So we encourage you to spread the word and take part in any way that makes sense to you. I'm going to open it up for questions now. We have 7 minutes left. So please do feel free to enter questions into the chat box if you have any. And while we're waiting, I'll also open it up to Monica if she has anything else to add to the group.
No, thank you, Diana. I would welcome any questions that people have about NASPActs.
Monica, I think, so while we're waiting, and we can just put a few more minutes back on all of your calendars as well. But I did want to bring up something that has been brought up a number of times in our conversations at NASPA, which is that, where is the pronounced difference between what we're doing with NSADA and NASPActs?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, Diana. And I think there's a lot of benefit to having these programs overlap. As the EISJ division evolves NASPActs, one of the things that we're thinking about are, can we work with other in-person events that are taking place? So for example, at the strategies conferences that took place in January, some people wanted to participate in the Women's March, which took place at the same on the last day of the strategies conferences. And so the EISJ division worked with the strategies planning committee to put together some opportunities for people to engage if they chose to do that. And then also shared information about some of the national dialogues that were happening about the Women's March with the people who participated in that conference. So that's an example of taking advantage of some of the in-person opportunities and having NASPActs be something that happens throughout the year. I think NSADA is focused on creating a day of action that really it's a focused initiative to help people recognize their role in being able to move issues of policy and advocacy forward. And I think with National Student Affairs Day of Action, it's trying to figure out, maybe some examples and opportunities to place in front of members. Some of those will be in person, but again, as we evolve this in the division, we may want to think about taking advantage of legislative session timelines and, how can we work with RPI and the Policy and Advocacy Team, maybe to organize some virtual letter writing campaigns, in a particular region or something like that. So that it's evolving, but we're hoping it grows into ongoing opportunities for action. And again, kind of trying to maintain that philosophy of interrupting the normal course of business. So, you weren't thinking about this? Well, here's a chance for you to think about this and to take action.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is a great clarification that NSADA, is something that NASPA the association itself is putting on once a year, and that NASPActs is something that is driven by the division, and there are all these different opportunities to take advantage of social justice initiatives that are kind of happening at the ground level. I think that was really informative, Monica. So we had a question about the policy pop-ups. Are there going to be any kinds of prizes or kind of handouts or things that go along with the policy pop-ups?
Great question. We will have handouts for sure. We will have a small handout that's going to be given at each of the policy pop-ups that talks through, 3 or 4 things that we want you to know about this issue, and then 3 or 4 things, actions that you can take to affect change. Those handouts, as we're envisioning them, will actually have information about all of the topics. So if you are only able to make one work, you will actually be able to find out about, that same thing, things to know and things to do about all of the issues that we're covering. The policy pop-ups are going to be a part of a kind of a sticker campaign that we're doing with one of our sponsors. And so if you attend one of the pop-ups and you kind of get a sticker for attending, but there are 5 different kinds of programs that you can go to, and the pop-ups are one of those. And then if you get all 5 of those, you can qualify for prizes. But that's going to be something you can find out more about when we're on site.
Cool. I'm excited for the policy pop-ups. Okay.
Thanks.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for joining me today at this very special session of our policy briefing series right before annual. I hope that everybody has a great afternoon, and we're going to go ahead and close out for today. So thanks, Monica.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.